Good morning, good afternoon, folks. It is a very exciting day to be back with yet another episode of the Auto Trends podcast. It's the boys, the 2W boys are back. Really an exciting guest on today. Really exciting things that are happening in the automotive. Again, our goal and a mission and objective when we first got into this was to bring the most cutting edge, forward thinking discussions with high quality leaders, not only in the automotive industry, but from also adjacent industries, because our objective is to take the automotive industry forward in the best way possible with the industry experts, automotive or not. I think there's a lot to learn about, about other verticals. It's a lot consumer electronics, right? Taking pages out of consumer goods, out of different ways that other industries have thought about profitability, growth, branding. How do you grow a profitable business? We're in the business in general is a matter about creating value for the end consumer, creating value for your teams, right? Creating value for your employees so they ultimately can put food on the table and have a great high quality of life. But before we get to Craig Fox, man, he is absolutely awesome, and we are so thrilled to have him on. Before we give him a nice little intro, Lucas Welk, man, it's good to see you again, brother.
Absolutely, man. No, this is something we've been talking about for a long time, and we've been discussing with Craig getting him on, and no, super excited. We talked about this in our last episode that we launched yesterday, and here he is. I've known, actually, I'll just give a very brief introduction, I guess, to Craig. I've known Craig actually for quite some time. He spends some time with me here in Southeast Asia. We live quite close together. And he's COO and founder, obviously, of OnSource. But Craig, I'll let you kind of give a little bit more of an introduction in terms of what you do and where you are and your various
Yeah,
locations. And let
yeah.
us
Well,
hear it.
first of all, thanks guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. A little bit of my background here is I had founded a couple different companies, one of which was an e-commerce software company. And just like everybody else, I was looking for cost-effective ways to grow our business. So I had been traveling around the Southeast Asia area and was visiting the Philippines. And just the people that I came across were so nice, so easy to get along with, intelligent, college educated, great people. So I thought it would be a good idea if we started trying to outsource some positions. So what I did is I looked for a graphic designer first and found a graphic designer here, hired him as a freelancer, so to speak, and went back to the States and was working with him, and things were just working out great. I was getting actually a higher output from the graphic designer here in the Philippines than we were getting from the one in the States. So we decided to kind of sever the relationship with the one in the States, and then every new position that started coming up in the software company, we would simply start hiring over here. Well, eventually you have enough people over here that you're like, hey, why don't we just start forming an office? At the time that I started all of this, I was sort of naive and thought that it would be kind of easy, to form a company in a different country, or at least here in the Philippines. So, I sort of started coming here more often so I could work with the team and start the process of forming that organization. Did that, was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. It gives you appreciation of the way that you can form an organization in 2 days in America versus in other countries. It's a very long, somewhat frustrating process to go through. But got the company formed here. Continued to hire other people over here. Eventually, what happened is the software company was acquired, and we spun off parts of that software company into what is now known as OnSource. And really, our objective there is just to work with growth focused organizations in getting high quality talent through remote staffing at a cost effective rate and help them grow their business. So that's kind of how I got started here. That's kind of what I've been doing here in Southeast Asia.
Amazing. And I'll just jump in real quick. And in full disclosure, I mean, we've got employees here through Craig, and I mean that work for us for 2W, and I mean it's been a resounding, success that just what we've had. So full disclosure on that, by the way. But Gideon, yeah, your thoughts on it as well, and how it pertains to the clients that we're talking to all the time in automotive.
Yeah, well, what I find so interesting about this topic is, okay, well, two things. First and foremost, if anybody listening in our listener base and you're not familiar with Southeast Asia, it is a freaking awesome place.
It is.
I've backpacked
It is.
Southeast Asia, into from the Taiwan into Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, back into Malaysia, Singapore, into all over, and obviously the Philippines. I spent over a month there. It's and I left. I left with one thing: the people of the Philippines are the greatest people on
They
earth.
are. They
Like
really are.
the giving, the kindness. I was invited to so many homes for dinner, and I left there because it's funny how this is so comes kind of full circle. I left there with the feeling of just gratitude, and the people of the Philippines. It's like that was like my favorite country.
Yeah.
So I understand kind of y'all's lens with both of you living there, and obviously looking at remote staffing and creating a big opportunity for the communities in the Philippines, and for the really to help them level up not only their education but plug them into the professional environments globally. So I want to at least call that out, because I think when you start to look at, okay, remote staffing, or hiring somebody maybe outside your region, or wherever you do business, it can be scary.
Yep.
And I think it can be scary because you feel like you're letting go control. But
Yep.
in reality is when you let go of that control, or you feel that, you actually strengthen that muscle of growth, of
Agreed.
profitability, of of now managing outside of, well, I've got to see Bob in the office every single day or else everyone panics. You start to relinquish some of those things, and that is the by definition growth, right? When I
Right.
let go of something, and I begin to exercise a muscle, that muscle will continue to grow. And so I come from automotive. I love automotive. My mission in automotive is very simple, is to be a big part of pushing it forward. I've been in it from the distributor level, at the technology level. Revolution Parts is a big part of what we do from a technology side. But when we look at the industry, right? A lot of the Auto Trends podcast, we talk about industry things, and we talk about it in a sense that largely the automotive sector, there's a few things that are really important: profitability, right? Scale, and labor, right? Those are
Right.
things that are really important. Um, and so I think when we look at the automotive side, largely this is an unknown topic. And so the more that we can kind of understand from your perspective, what are some of the greater benefits? How long does it take to get people and train them up? What are some of
Sure.
the factors that you think are important that really can help strengthen the automotive industry through remote staffing for strategic levels, right? Some levels that you think, or some roles that you think are meant for it.
Sure. The way that we can approach that question, Gideon, is we kind of take a look at what people think of outsourcing right now. And one of the things that people think, your analogy about control is absolutely correct. And the reality is yeah, you do lose a bit of a sense of control. But to your point, you're strengthening that muscle. You're thinking things through. The other thing that when we talk about remote staffing is it's important to understand that the people that you are hiring here, and specifically in the Philippines, they are working your hours. So they are online with you. You are communicating with them on a daily basis. So while you're not physically seeing them in the office, you're talking with them all the time online. You are scheduling meetings. Nowadays in the internet, we can get on the video chat in less than 5 or 10 seconds. You can talk about it, get it all taken care of, work it out, critique what's been worked on, things like that. So it's almost exactly the same thing. In some cases, depending on how far away the person is that you were working with in the office, in some cases, it's actually easier to get hold of the people through remote staffing. Now, as far as is staffing up those positions and locating the people that you're looking for, it really all depends on the type of staff that you're looking for. For customer service agents in kind of more tactical positions, more executable positions, we can staff those up relatively quickly. A couple of weeks, we can get those going. In some cases, we've worked with companies that are looking for higher level business development individuals. sales, people with a lot of sales experience, with a lot of lead generation and lead development experience. And those people, are a little bit more difficult to find, because what we find in those positions is the client wants to make sure that they have a firm grasp of English. So by the way, everybody here speaks English. I think we need to address that. Everybody here, from the second that they go to school, are learning English. Okay, so English is a very fluent second language here. Now, at the business development level, they want to have somebody that has an expert grasp of that. So, we kind of are looking for people that have, the accent just about gone, visibly gone. And finding those people, can take a little bit extra time. Finding upper level full stack developers can take a little time. Sometimes that can take 3 weeks to a month to find the correct fit. And what we do in that process really is we work with you to understand the job that you're looking to fill. So we want to understand the experience. We want to understand how many years of experience that individual should have, the type of experiences, the type of software they should have known or should be working with, and things like that. And then what we do is we put that into a job rec that then goes out to our recruitment team, who has various resources that they use to recruit, specifically here in the Philippines, but we can go worldwide if we need to. And we start bringing in the resumes, or the CVs that we call them here. What's a little bit different about our organization is we actually encourage the clients to be involved in the hiring process. So what we will do is we'll take that CV in our interview with the client, and we'll start fielding out the candidates. Okay. So after that, we're going to get to a few candidates that we think are going to meet the needs or exceed the needs of what you're looking for in the position that you're looking for. And then what we like to do, though it's not mandatory, we certainly can take on the entire hiring process if the client wants us to. But what we like to do then is get the client back involved and go, hey, here's this individual. Why don't you have a conversation with this individual? Make sure that there's a good fit between, the people that they're going to be working with and this individual, and go from there. Most of the time, we on the first swipe, we hit it out of the park. Example in Jennifer, the one that works with you folks. I think that was the first interview that you guys had, and you're like, yeah, this is it. This is what we're looking for. But if not, we can keep bringing candidates in until we get to what you're looking for. Then we kind of agree on salary. That's something that we like to do is make sure that we want to make sure that the people that we are hiring here are absolutely happy, and we want to make sure that the clients that we're working with are happy with the people that we're providing them. So we want to make sure that that's a match from a compensation standpoint, which we can talk about how we compensate the employees here a little bit later. And then once that happens, we start going through the training process. Now, setting a start date in the training process. Now, on our end, just as a requirement, we do have a bit of training that we go through just to go into our company. But depending on the client that we work with, will really depend on what that training is going to be. So most of the clients want to work with that individual on their own and train them up on their own and provide their own documents on their own. So that's part of the deal. So we turn them over to it. We have software and systems that we use with the remote staffing to ensure that they are online on time, to ensure that they are working, to ensure it's monitoring keystrokes, it's taking visuals of the computer and things like that, to ensure that you have an employee that's and by the way, it's actually managing and assessing production too of that employee. So what you're getting, even through training, is you're getting a very productive employee with systems in place to ensure that they are productive. So I understand that was a bit long-winded, Gideon. I apologize, but I hope that I answered your question.
Oh, no. I think that's the biggest thing, because I think a lot of people have misnomers about it, right? You have a lot of Upwork, and you have a lot of these tech platforms where you can go in and put a project, and then you're doing the work and this, but the remote staffing is a little bit different than that, right? Versus project based. And I'm going to pay $100 for this, or I'm going to actually bring somebody in at a cost-effective, high-quality, checks and balances, already vetted, high-quality talent to now be kind of blended into the organization.
It's a part of your team.
Yeah, and they become
Yeah.
a part, and it's like they become a part of everything. They're a part of it. But that's one thing I wanted to kind of touch on is when you look at checks and balances. So if we look at someone who just goes out randomly and finds somebody on a remote staffing level with no checks and balances versus kind of how your path is, we have checks and balances, we put them through training, we do a lot of vetting. My guesstimate would say the outcome, because that's what we're after, business outcome, the business outcome would be far different. Would you agree
It's
with
going
that?
to be. I agree with it 100%. And let me talk a little bit more about that. So, we are a Philippine organization here. We are
Yeah.
incorporated in the Philippines. So, we have to follow in Philippine employment laws. So, unlike the other kind of the Upwork and the other things that you had talked about there, we have to provide our employees with a series of benefits that are required by the government, which ultimately makes them a happier employee because we are covering their social security, we're dealing with their taxes. There's something here called PHIBIC, which is a fund that helps them acquire housing. We are paying those things for them. We are helping them with their health care. On our end, what we want to do is we actually take benefits a little bit further. We provide them, and Lucas can speak to this, and I think you've kind of touched on it earlier, is Filipinos as a culture are a very friendly, group oriented culture. They
Mhm.
like to be around each other. They like to converse. They like to converse with us. They like to converse with everybody. So what we have is events planned, usually, at least once a month, sometimes once every other month, where we're getting the team together and we're doing team building exercises with these people. So all of these things, and we also have something that we call a retention bonus. So the longer that they stay with you and the longer that they stay with us, the more money they're going to be making at a payout a couple years down the line, which is extremely beneficial, which is why we see very, very low turnover in the people that we work with. Because ultimately, we are providing all of these benefits, the health care, the PHIBIC, the social security, the retention bonuses, the in-staff, pizza parties and all that type of stuff that they love. We're providing that at a rate that is almost always at least 50% lower than what you're paying in-house. Okay.
Mhm.
From the relationship that we have with the client, that's the way that it works. So we're taking care of everything back here for the employee, and we're taking care of everything back here for the client. The client doesn't have to start a company in the Philippines, which is extraordinarily difficult to do. They don't have to worry about the complexities of employment laws for the Philippines. We're taking care of all of that for you. All the client does is they pay us a monthly fee, which is obviously um,
Sure.
remote staff employee, and that's it. So it makes a very beneficial and very great relationship for the client and the remote staffing, because everything works through us as far as is those benefits and the salary and everything like that.
Yeah, and
Eh,
I think
Go
you
ahead.
make a good point there, Craig. There's a couple of really unique things that I've noticed over the 5 years of knowing you. You're there in the office, and I think that's a huge advantage because a lot
Yep.
of I think people are going to have concerns that, right, obviously there is cultural differences living here. We know that we've had employees here. There are many, but you've got, a Western or somebody from the same part of the world, in that office that's managing these employees, at least not managing them, but looking over them kind of day to day. So you've got a direct contact, somebody that can understand your specific needs, your cultural values and differences, and can kind of, adjust if need be and pivot, that employee in a certain direction or have that conversation with them so that both parties can have a better understanding. And like you say, your team building stuff. I mean, I've gone countless times with you and the team. We just went a few weeks ago, spent the weekend at a resort with the team, and they become a very strong, cohesive team. And, these employees are very loyal. You're offering them great packages. They're sticking around a long time. So I think that's a major advantage. And I was just going to tell you, maybe talk a little bit upon, like, once the training's done, through OnSource, it's actually these companies, though, let's say from an employee leasing side, when they get an employee, they're actually going to be the ones managing them, though, day
Yeah.
to day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We don't
they're
manage
going
them
to
day
be
to
the
day.
one giving them the direction. You're not going to worry about somebody here guiding them in the wrong direction, or they're going to be accountable to your company. You're going to manage them just as you would any other employee. And
You're absolutely
you know
right. Yeah.
And to me, it's no different than in the US now with companies, that are offering remote work, Gideon, just like Revolution Parts type of thing. We've got employees that are located around the entire country. So whether you're working, in Arizona and you've got an employee, in Florida, there's not a whole lot of difference than sitting in Arizona and having an employee in the Philippines.
No.
They're both remote employees.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on a great point, Lucas, which is this is your employee. We're helping you with that relationship, and
Right.
you're right. We call it boots on the ground. We do have staff sometimes that comes in from the on-source office into here, but I'm here 24/7. I'm here 365 days a year. I've made this my home now. So I'm working with the team, bridging, the small cultural gaps that we have here. But it's important to touch upon the fact that the Philippines and the United States culturally are very aligned in a lot of things. There isn't the big kind of issues that we see with other countries. I think the Philippines, was governed by the United States for a long period of time and actually has gained its independence fairly recently. So they're very familiar with American cultures and American values. That's why the people that we hire are always, college educated, hardworking individuals that have those values that we're looking for, in employment through the United States.
And that's one question that I have here, because I think, in my professional career, um, like, you always bring in new employees. I take a lot of pride in building teams. I love building teams. To me, that is something that I take very personally. Anything professional job, I want to build the best team, and it's always a requirement that this is going to be your best work and your best team. Trying to set that kind of set that stage early, I think it's important. And when you have a new kind of remote staffing employee, you run through all the vetting, you ensure they're taken care of, you ensure that this is a really high level operation, and the value that you're creating ultimately for the Filipino community and the people is that you bring in really high quality talent. Now, an organization comes in and they say, "Hey, I would like to get a start." There's two things that I'm kind of curious about is how quick, one, could I ramp up with a remote staffer, and kind of where would you recommend an organization start, and then how does the training work? I mean, if we hire a new employee in let's just take the US for example.
Mhm.
Well, there's still a ramp period, right? There's
Yep.
a 3-month training period. I don't care who you are, if you're a Harvard MBA or not, there's still a ramp period.
Yeah.
Talk us through a little bit about that from the remote staffing, because my sense is it's very similar, but
It's
from a remote staffing perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's not without its challenges, and I think you guys are aware of that as you kind of are working through training the employees that you're working with. But they're the exact same challenges that you're going to face with an in-house employee. You're right. There is a ramp up period, that you go through, and it can be anywhere from a month and a half to 3-4 months. It really depends on the position, things like that. Interestingly enough, we find that developers, the full stack developers, have the shortest ramp period because that is what it is. You know what I mean? You're in
Yeah.
front of a computer. Let's start coding. But the more human interfacing positions, the outbound, inbound sales, the customer support, the live chat, things like that. There is this period that you need to go through to train them, because you want them to not only answer things a specific way, or excuse me, answer things correctly, but you want them to answer it a specific way that relates to your brand. And of
Mhm.
course, that individual cannot come into that position without knowing those sort of things. So, as much as we can, we try to field people to ensure that they are meeting the knowledge requirements and have the experience of the systems and stuff that you're using. But that's not to say that we can hit home runs every time. And the
Sure.
closer we can get for you, the less of that ramp up period there's going to be. But once that ramp up period is done with, and when I'm talking about that, just like any other employee, you have to dedicate your time to train them. You can't just go throw everything over the fence and get this all taken care of and expect it to work out. It wouldn't work out in the US. It's not going to work out here. You've got to
Mhm.
work with them to kind of take them. But once you get through that, what we find is you have an incredibly, and our clients have commented on this, you have an incredibly dedicated, an incredibly hardworking individual that will go out of their way to ensure that projects and things are taken care of for you. You know, in Lucas, and it sounds like you can speak on this, Gideon. Again, back to this whole family orientation here. When it comes to the family, this is almost like the U.S. Maybe in the 50s, from what I understand, or something like that, where it's very family oriented, type of culture and environment here. So when they bring you into, or when you bring this employee into there, they literally start thinking of you as family. That's the mentality that they have here. So they
Yep.
connect with you. And that's another thing too, is some of the clients that we work with have always expressed interest in coming down here and meeting the employee. And absolutely, we encourage those types of things to happen. And we'd be happy to facilitate those types of things happening, because the employee does, more so than I find in the United States. Once they get through that training period, they think of you as family. They attach to the company. They think of the company as their family, which I think creates a very dedicated and hardworking individual.
Yep, yep. And so Craig, if I'm, let's say, let's not make it specific to the automotive industry, but if I have a company and I'm sitting there in the US and I'm looking to, outsource some of the roles and I just don't know where to start.
Right.
If I'm sitting there, what are some of the roles that you've typically seen are the most successful roles that companies now are outsourcing? And, what kind of ramp up do you recommend, starting with one employee, graduating it, kind of into your organization, but what are those roles that you're seeing the biggest success with from a
Great
client
question.
standpoint?
Great question. And I can't speak specifically, as you mentioned there, to the automotive industry, but we see the highest level of success in quality assurance. Okay. Um, it's just that role seems to have a lot of difficulty being filled in the Western world. Where here, they love that sort of stuff. They love testing things. They love making sure things work. But, I'm not entirely sure why, but we see the highest level of success in quality assurance in the developers, just because they are playing within a playground in those types of roles. This is the playground. Play within it, do what you need to do, and get these things taken care of. And those types of positions seem to have the largest level of success. As far as what we can hire here, we can do inbound, as I've already mentioned, full stack development, front end development, website, mobile development, those types of things, back end development, Java, PHP, .NET. Those types of positions we can hire for. But I think specifically in the environment that we're talking about here, um, we can do lead generation specialists. And what these individuals do is you start defining with them who your target market is and who the companies that you want to do business with, or the individuals that you want to do business with. And what they do is they start putting together lead lists. Based on what that target looks like, put them into Excel or into your CRM for other individuals, which these can be a combined individual, a lead generation and outbound business development agent, to go out and find these people. We have a lot of success with those types of individuals. But again, as we had talked about prior, the best success that you're going to see is if you realize that this individual needs the same amount of training that the individual that you would be hiring to sit next to your desk needs. And
Right.
once you come to that realization and you're willing to put in that time, it pays off in silver dollars, because, as I expressed before, you have an individual here now that is going to be loyal and dedicated to your organization moving forward.
Right.
Well,
And
well,
sorry,
go ahead,
getting
Luke.
just one more thing, just quickly following up on that. So just typically, I know every role is kind of different, but if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, right, this sounds great, what kind of cost savings would you be looking at, roughly for, an average employee?
Right.
I know each one is going to have its nuance. It's going to be something different, but let's just say hiring one employee here versus hiring that same employee in the US. Typically, what are you seeing there as a cost savings to an organization?
We like to use the number 50 to 60%, and that's sort of a generic
Right.
savings. When you're dealing in marketing positions, those depending on the amount of experience that they have there, maybe search engine or social media marketing and things like that, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 50% savings. But if you're dealing in high-end developers, which in the US and in San Francisco and those areas can command, you know, $200,000 sometimes, or $150,000, you're going to see significant savings here. You're going to see 70 to 80%, savings. So it really all depends on the position. Now,
Sure.
in the sales positions, what we like to do is we like to build our relationships, or build our compensations here, just like they do in the States, which is a base plus commission. To incentivize and reward. So again, depending on how that's structured, we can work with you to that can have some tremendous cost savings, just
Sure.
because, and this, both of you know this, the cost of living here is significantly less compared to
Yeah.
the States, which has dramatically changed since the pandemic. So the you can see and you can realize these savings because these individuals, don't need the same requirements that you need for US.
Correct.
And for context, just so our listeners have a little context, I was on a 6-month backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, one country being the Philippines. I drank every night. I had a hotel every night. I ate 3 meals, 4 meals a day, whatever I wanted to eat. I spent 7,000 US dollars
Yeah.
for 6
Right.
months. So context from a cost of living perspective is relatively good. And one thing I want to call out on, when we start to look at the US market and we start to look at the workforce coming out of college or even out of trade schools or maybe even high school, we see a turnover every 2 years at a job is a long time these days.
Right.
We see a turnover rate of a very high turnover rate, which every time an organization turns over, there's tribal knowledge lost, and new employee comes in, and you have to build it up, right? And
Right.
I've been in a part of like interviews, guys, time out of college, and they're commanding $125,000, and they have only been a bar back their junior year of college.
Right.
That is insane to me.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
no, how about you not do that? And
Right.
so I think when we look at the remote staffing and you look at, and you touched on it a little, Craig, and I think this is critically important, is once you get through the training period and you're like, wow, this is a fantastic employee, a part of our team, we see the profitability. But how do you typically look at the turnover rate once you've got through the training period, and once that person is ingrained into your culture? What do you see from a turnover? My sense
Oh,
is it's a long-term family employee.
it's virtually non-existent. Once
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
get to that, and in the training period, while you're still working with that individual, if it's not working out, what we encourage people, let's call the ball on this thing. Let's get
Yeah.
somebody in there that's going to work out. So sometimes they do make it through the interview process, and you start getting a couple weeks into it during the training period, and that's all part of the agreement that we have. Let's for the benefit of the employee here and the benefit of you, let's call the
Right.
ball, let's get somebody in here, and let's try it again, and make sure this works. So once they get through that training period, to your point, Gideon, we see very low turnover as a result of anything on this end. They become, as I touched on before, they become very dedicated, very attached to the organization. And not only that, you know, there used to be a time there, especially when we were beneficial, or we felt happy that our employer was giving us a job. And Lucas, you can speak to that here. You have that sense here. They're
Yes.
very happy that they're
Yeah.
have this employment with you. They're excited
Definitely.
that they're able to work for you, as opposed to, oh, I don't want to go to work today, and
Mhm.
rah, 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 those types of
Right.
things. You ask them to work weekends, sure, not a problem. You ask them to work a few nights, they can take care of it. It's not an issue. So if the employee is treated fairly, the turnover thing becomes a non-issue, really.
Yeah. And I think Gideon, we've talked about it. Craig, I know, and I have talked about it, but these are kind of your old school employees from back in the day, from Canada, from the US, that value the company that they're working for, that have a loyalty to the company. And as long as that company shows the same loyalty back, you've got a great relationship happening there. And I love to see that because it's the old school way of doing things.
Right.
Like you say, I mean, Gideon, Jennifer working with us here now. We know we can message her first thing in the morning or late at night or on the weekends, and never does she bitch and moan about doing this or that. She's happy to do it. And we don't take the piss out of her. We're not calling her every night at midnight asking her to do stuff, but in the odd chance that we do need to ask her to do something, there's never any issue because she knows, right, they're looking after me. They're doing extracurricular stuff here, with me. They're looking after our family. They're paying me a fair wage. We're not trying to take advantage because she's an offshore worker. She's
Right.
our employee,
Right. Right.
and that's how we look at it.
And I just wanted to touch on something there, Lucas. It's important that you state when you're having that, those initial meetings with that employee, that this is the way it's going to be. Like you guys
Mhm.
that did that. Look, we're going to need you at all hours. We're going to need you, and you figured out and made it work. And that's just for your benefit, So it's very important on both sides that there's correct expectation to ensure the success of the relationship. So if that's what you're looking for, let's be very forward with the people that we're interviewing, get them on board, move forward.
Right.
Yep.
It's all about results, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, and that's what we explained to you when we hired Jennifer, and that's what we explained to Jennifer. I mean, in the role that she's doing with us, which is kind of very much a hybrid role for sales and marketing, I don't care what you do, really, when you work, as long as, our clients are being looked after, emails are being responded to, posts are being done, and we're getting, results from a sales and marketing standpoint. Beyond that, that's at the end of the day what's important. And like
Right.
you say, you guys, did a great job in the hiring process and getting her to us, explaining what we're looking for. We explained to her what we're looking for, and no, it's worked out tremendous.
And you know, the remote staffing and the outsourcing, there's many organizations that do this. Some of the highest growing or the fastest growing companies in the world. And again, you guys know this. You walk down the street here, you see Amazon, you see
Mhm.
T-Mobile, you see Chase Bank, you see Bank of America. They all have these tremendous, huge offices here that are doing this exact same thing. And these are the forward-thinking, fast-growing companies in our country. So we're excited to be able to to provide smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses this avenue for tapping in to this market and creating these relationships and providing this tremendous cost savings to companies that are interested.
Well, and I think when you look at the automotive and if you look at the automotive just fundamentally, um, if you look at anybody that is 50 plus, there is so many guys and women that have been in the industry for 40 plus years
Right.
with the same company for 40 plus years. Like that is really common.
Yeah.
Now, as you continue to scale back in age, obviously you don't have the data to look at, but you start to see the younger kind of generation moving and jumping and hopping industry to industry, right? And I think when you look at automotive, it's a very prideful industry, right? People love automotive. Once you get in automotive, you love automotive. I'm a
Right.
part of that. I am. And that's where I think that if you start to look at through the lens at some of the really forward organizations, kind of some of the names that you just rattled off. Of course, those are the enterprise global organizations that this becomes a necessary need, and we're going to move down the path one way or the other just because we've grown out of everything, right? The second
Right.
we sign a lease, we're grown out of it. But when you look at the small, mid-sized, and even large organizations, that have not looked at this as a viable option, what in essence you're doing is you're paving the path forward for them to have an optimal outcome with the time that they commit. And
Right.
that's, at the end of the day, everything is really exchanged for time, right? That's
Right.
kind of what all of this is. And so as you exchange your time, I just think that this is a topic in our industry that needs to be discussed more, because I think there's a big misnomer around, well, I pay X for just to get a project done, right? So now I don't know the employee. I don't care about the employee. I don't care what he eats for lunch. I don't care about his benefits. But this is a different way of thinking
It
about that
is.
type of
It
model.
is.
This is bringing somebody into your family and inviting them over and being friends outside of work, in work, hey, Jill, how are you this morning? They've been with us for 5 years, 7 years. They know the model. And once you achieve that, these are levers for profitability as an organization. These are levers for fast tracking your growth. These are disruption levers in our industry where you're constantly thinking, how do we grow? How do we grow? Well, let's not say, maybe let's go, sell more product. Maybe we look at our P&L and understand where our costs are being distributed and then redistribute, train, and there's a growth lever there. So I think that that's where we have to get as an industry, is let's not just look at top line revenue, but let's look at what goes into the P&L and uncover opportunities that are like, well, shit, there's 4 points all day long. We just have to rethink our strategy here. So that's why I think this is so important to talk about.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed 100%.
No, 100%. And, I know we're getting close on time here towards the end, but I know that Craig's always happy to have a conversation about this, and feel free to obviously reach out to us or visit 2wautogroup.com and, reach out to Gideon, myself, Craig, and happy to hop on a call with anybody, whether you're a manufacturer, distributor, retailer, whatever. And and I know Craig will be happy to sit there and assess your needs and kind of talk about your business and find out what he can do for you.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you guys, giving me some time today and talking with me about these sort of things. And if like I said, if anybody has any questions, reach out to you folks or myself, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Well, as always, Craig, it is our pleasure. We don't ever take anybody's time for granted. We thank you for giving your time to the Auto Trends podcast. And as always, boys and girls, this is an automotive industry podcast. We talk about the most cutting edge topics with the great leaders of our industry. And it is an exciting time for us to bring these topics. If you have any questions or comments, reach out to us. As always, we are the voice of the industry. This is the Auto Trends podcast.